We will now come back to order, and I welcome our third panel. We have Chairman Hill, and if she's able to make it, and we understand people have travel issues and so forth, Ranking Member Waters from the Committee on Financial Services. Your full statements will be submitted for the record, and we ask that you summarize your statement in 5 minutes. Chairman Hill, I welcome your testimony.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member McGovern. It's good to be back in business in the Rules Committee and delighted to be with you tonight. I want to thank my great colleague, our great new member of the House Financial Services Committee from Florida, Congresswoman Salazar, for the opportunity to testify today on this resolution which condemns the atrocities of socialism and warns of the implications it poses to our society. I was taught from an early age to be grateful for our gift here in America of freedom. While attending elementary school in Little Rock, one of my favorite teachers was a young Cuban exile mother who taught us Spanish. Before settling in Arkansas, her family fled the Castro regime, an authoritarian government known for its brutally murdering thousands of political prisoners and Cuban citizens. Castro ripped families from their farms, businesses, and private property and repressed his people. Castro's socialist regime systematically destroyed one of the most beautiful countries in the world while stripping the people of their individual freedoms. While a young business person, I witnessed the brutality of state control when at the height of the Cold War in 1986, I joined a U.S. Army-led tour of East Berlin. Passing west to east through the incredibly infamous Berlin Wall of concrete, barbed wire, and machine guns through the infamous Checkpoint Charlie, I saw the stark contrast between West Berlin's full-color freedom versus East Berlin's black and white, cruel socialism and communism. The difference in treatment of citizens was unmistakable. On one side, the West had vibrant storefronts, bustling with employees and patrons, and all of its shelves fully stocked. And on the other side, the East drab buildings, still marked by Allied bomb scars, bore empty store windows, destitute and begging citizens, and an overarching veil of dissolution. Just 3.5 years later, following the fall of the Berlin Wall, I had the honor of representing President George H.W. Bush as his Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Treasury. I was tasked with designing and delivering economic and technical assistance to the citizens of countries freed from socialism, communism, spanning from the Baltic to the Black Sea. To this day, I keep a piece of the Berlin Wall in my office as a poignant reminder of the grim purpose to keep people in and keep freedom out. Now, three decades later, we rejoice in the triumph of capitalism and freedom over authoritarianism and the control of socialism. While my Democratic colleagues and I may not agree on everything, I certainly hope we can unite in recognizing that socialism stands in direct opposition to the values upon which America was founded. Time and time again, socialist policies have failed, resulting in unimaginable suffering for nations and millions of people across the globe. Despite socialism's long history of failure, we're met with insurgencies of people trying to institute that backwards framework. And a recent survey revealed a concerning trend. 62% of Americans aged 18 to 29 view socialism favorably. I worry that some of my Democratic colleagues have not learned from the lessons of the past. Many of their legislative proposals, although many well-intentioned, provide a path that leads us and our nation in a wrong direction, often towards a socialist failure. In their pursuit to tackle social issues, those on the far left have taken the approach that more closely mirrors communist China than proven free market solutions that make America the envy of the world. Again, this is not a critique of the integrity of any colleague or their intentions, which is why I believe it's a call to denounce socialism should be a resolution that we can all support in this House. During my time in the House, Republicans have consistently fought to safeguard our nation from the dangers of socialism. I urge my colleagues on both sides of the aisle in upholding American ideals by supporting this resolution. As history has proven, the alternatives, like socialism, will lead to catastrophic consequences. Let's send a strong message to our citizens and adversaries that socialism has no place in the United States. I want to thank Congressman Salazar again for her commitment, work on this important resolution. I yield back the balance of my time and look forward to our questions.
Gentleman yields back. Ms. Waters' statement will be placed into the record when we receive it. I now recognize the gentlelady from Minnesota, Ms. Fishbach.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And thank you, Representative Hill, for bringing it forward, and I thank Representative Salazar for introducing it. I think it really, it really does speak for itself as you take a look at the resolution, and you are absolutely right that socialism is against all of the principles that we're founded on, and so I think it's important that we state that. I'm a co-sponsor of the resolution, and you look at some of the things that happened in the election in New York, the mayor of New York, and, you know, there was, and someone running in Minneapolis who fortunately lost the position of mayor. But I think this is a critical time, and you mentioned also that young people see socialism favorably, and that really is, it really is a problem. And so I think that putting this resolution forward it's at a good time. And so again, I thank you, and I thank Representative Salazar, and I yield back.
And the lady yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from Massachusetts, Ranking Member Mr. McGovern, for his time of questioning.
Well, the gentleman knows I like him a lot, but I really can't believe that this is what we're spending our time debating in the Rules Committee right now. When every public opinion poll tells us that the issue of affordability is front and center. And this is what we're dealing with here in the Rules Committee. I mean, Chairman Hill, I mean, this resolution states that Congress, quote, denounces socialism in all its forms and opposes the implementation of socialist policies in the United States, end quote. So let's have a little lightning round here, since your bill doesn't have a definition of socialism in it. And I just want you to help me narrow it down a little bit, because, quite frankly, because Republicans routinely say that everything Democrats do is socialism. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding this. And, you know, I just have some yes or no questions that I hope to get you to just say if these things are socialist policies or not. So let's start. Socialist or not, Medicare.
I think it's I'll give you a yes or no answer. That is on the side of state control of health care, so I'd say it could be considered socialist.
Oh, wow, okay. Social Security.
No.
What about SNAP, the Food Assistance Program?
No.
How about VA Health or the VA Home Loan Program? Is that socialist?
I don't think so. I think that's a commitment we made following the admonition of President Lincoln to pay benefits to those who wore the uniform and served in uniform.
Fire departments?
No.
National parks?
No.
Public schools?
No.
How about the Affordable Care Act tax credits, which Republicans are refusing to extend?
Well, again, I think the state has far too much control in health care dominating it, and therefore I think the health care programs, as a general matter, could be considered state control and therefore on the side of socialism.
So, of all, okay, so of all those, I mean, you kind of hint that the tax credits might be, and Medicare, you mentioned, might be considered a socialist program. So is this resolution condemning Medicare?
No, it's condemning socialism.
Yeah, according to the bill, it says Congress announces socialism in all its forms. And you just said that Medicare could be considered a socialist program.
Yes, some people could consider it a too much state control. That's right.
Okay. Let me ask you a few more. Socialist or not, President Trump's proposal to use tariff revenue from his trade war to bail out farmers to the tune of billions of dollars.
I don't think that's socialism.
That's redistributing kind of.
Well, I don't.
I mean that's like a, well, whatever. I mean, I'm going to.
Yeah.
Yes. How about the Trump administration's $9 billion stake in chip manufacturer Intel?
I didn't support the CHIPS Act by the Biden administration. I'm not a big fan of industrial policy on that scale, personally.
So that's a yes for that?
Well, I wouldn't call it socialism. I'm not calling it socialism, but you're asking me,
Medicare is, but that's not. Okay. Commerce Secretary Lutnick recently stated that the Trump administration is considering taking ownership stakes in large defense companies like Boeing and Lockheed Martin. If he did that, would that be a socialist policy?
Not necessarily.
Yeah. So, look, again, there's no definition in here, but you just basically said that Medicare could be considered a socialist policy. And as I read, this is it's resolved that Congress denounces socialism in all its forms and opposes the implementation of socialist policies in the United States. Again, we did this last year.
You did. Well, as Congress, and you voted in favor of it, I think.
Yeah.
You voted against it in the
Yeah, I
rule. I
voted-
don't know how you voted
I
on it. Let's
voted,
see.
I think I voted no. Didn't
You
I?
voted no, yeah.
Yeah, no. Because there's no definition here. And I have to be honest with you, I'm really concerned, because I hear, I mean, I follow social media like everybody here does, listen to the news, and I hear the word socialist thrown around all the time for every program that seems to be about helping lift people out of poverty, that helps make people's quality of life better. And again, I think Medicare is a good program. I support it 1,000,000%. And so I cannot vote for a resolution that could be interpreted as condemning Medicare as a socialist policy. So I thank the gentleman for being here, but again, I wish we were doing something like extending the Affordable Care Act tax credits, or doing something to lower the cost of food for people. But this is what we're doing after 8 weeks of paid vacation. And again, I respect the gentleman, but I respectfully will not support this. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the gentleman of Georgia, Mr. Scott, for his time of questioning.
Certainly Medicare is a social insurance program, but I don't think I would disagree with them. I do not believe that it is a socialist program. There's still a lot of consumer choice in there, and people pay a premium, pay a tax all of their life to have access to it. I think what's so alarming to me, and my granddad told me if things kept going in the country many years ago, that we would end up with people who were socialists and communists actually running for office and getting elected in this country. And I guess I kind of didn't think that ever happened here, but it is happening in this country. And I do think that it is important that we bring awareness to what socialism actually is and the dangers of it. And so I intend to support the resolution, and I don't have any questions, Mr. Hill, unless you have something that you would like to add.
No.
Gentleman yields back. Now recognize the gentlelady of Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon, for her time of questioning.
Thanks. I would yield first to the ranking member.
So it would seem to me that it would have maybe been smart to put a definition in this bill of what you're talking about, because you guys came and agreed on what socialism is and which programs are socialist. And again, the word gets thrown around an awful lot. I don't like it when it gets thrown around, when you're putting Medicare in the same pile as when you're talking about, Fidel Castro. I mean, I just don't think I think this is an important and vital social program. But the bottom line is, increasingly in our political system, the word is being thrown around to describe politicians. Maybe, I don't know, maybe you think we're all socialists up here. I don't know what you think. But the bottom line is that the word gets thrown around very casually. And if you're going to have a resolution, condemning it, I would think that it would maybe be in everybody's interest to have a detailed definition of what you're talking about. And so I thank the gentlelady for yielding. I yield my time back to her.
Thanks. I do think that is a fatal flaw in this legislation, is there's no definition of socialism. And when it is increasingly being used as some kind of scarlet A to brand anyone or anything that you don't like, I know that every member on this side of the dais has been called a socialist by our Republican opponents, often on the same day that we're called a corporate tool. So, pardon me if I don't find the lack of definition of any help. In the absence of a definition, we do see increasingly that everything that those on the right dislike is called socialist. And I find it small wonder that particularly young people are more open to considering the possibility of some socialist proposals when they hear everyone being labeled a socialist and the economy is sure as hell not working for them. They can't afford a house, they can't afford a car, they can't afford their student loans, and our government, our Congress is not doing anything to help them out other than throwing around, frankly, stupid resolutions denouncing the horrors of socialism without even saying what that is. So I would be more than happy to endorse a bill that celebrates our democratic republic, the separation of powers, that denounces authoritarianism, but this is just another bullshit bill, and I can't support it. I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Now recognize the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Norman, for his time of questioning.
You know, this describes the difference now that the two parties have, Chairman Hill. This describes what those comments were, describes what we're up against. And I agree with the Supreme Court who, on the pornography issue, they said they know it when they see it. There's no definition. But if their party, which is pretty frightening, is endorsing a man in New York City that is advocating for total government control of gas stations, of our supermarkets, dismantling the police. That's the difference now that we're facing in this country. That's the part that my good friend, Mr. McGovern, you know, he's parsing the things, programs that,
I just
you know,
support
that
Medicare.
began years ago and got off track. You know, Social Security should not be rated. Medicare should have guardrails. They want no guardrails. They want total government control. That's the difference in the Democrat Party now. Marxist socialist, assuming office, funded by a man by the name of George Soros, who does not have the best interests of this country. It's pretty clear, it's interesting, it shocked me, his comments. But that's where we are today in this country. That's where their party is. That's why Americans are not going to endorse that.
I think, Mr. Norman, if I could, I think the capitalist system offers individual ownership, freedom of choice. I think those are important issues. And that when somebody proposes to have state control of all the gas stations or all the grocery stores in New York, you know, I view that as a taking, which is anti-private property, anti-choice, anti-freedom of association and business, and that's not the right direction for our country. And that's how frequently you've seen socialist tendencies begin to get a bigger and bigger part of the economy and eventually take over the country in full state control, as we saw in Eastern Europe, and I witnessed firsthand when I was there working after the Berlin Wall fell, and I don't think that's in the interest of the United States, and I think it's absolutely something that's shared by both political parties in the United States, the majority of both political parties in the United States, that our market-based system here and our capitalist system has done more to lift people out of poverty here and around the world than any other system ever devised by man. And as we celebrate the 250th birthday of our country, we ought to be celebrating that and rejecting state control and state dominance of every aspect of our lives.
Would you not agree that socialism is a godless type, call it non-religion? Do they embrace a God as our Constitution does?
Well, I think you'd have to be looking at the people who've used socialism to control the state and make that a decision, not so much about the definition that we might come up with on socialism, but how people have implemented it in their country. And in the 20th century experience that we've seen, whether it's in Cuba or in Eastern Europe, it was a godless religion. I mean, religion was condemned by Marx, by Lenin, by communism, and that doctrine is what governed so many socialists and communists in the 20th century.
Well, it shows you the kind of war we're in with with their party, with their thought process. And regardless of what they say, socialism is a godless type of abuse of the thing that made this country great, which is freedom, faith, family, and freedom. Appreciate it. I support this. Yield back.
Thank you.
Gentleman yields back. I'm now going to recognize Ms. Ledger Fernandez of New Mexico. We have worked it out so we can get the parliamentary procedure right, that she is then going to yield some time to Ms. Waters, who's here, so that she can make her opening statement. And I appreciate that. Thank you.
That is exactly what I'm going to do. Welcome, Ranking Member Waters, and we would love to hear your opening statement.
You're still not on. I have the darndest time with those mics.
There it is. Congressman Griffith and Ranking Member McGovern and members of the committee, once again, We're not here to debate solutions that lower costs for Americans, tackle the affordable housing crisis, support small businesses, or build a thriving financial system that works for everyone. Instead, Republicans are advancing a resolution that undermines critical programs like Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and Obamacare by simply suggesting that these policies that support hardworking Americans leads to despotic, totalitarian government. And so, let me just ask, the government shutdown demonstrated how important food assistance programs, how important they are to 42 million people in America. But this resolution would cast such assistance as so-called socialism. It's crystal clear how President Trump views the Americans who rely so very much on food assistance after possibly breaking the law to pay masked federal agents as they arrest U.S. citizens. The administration fought twice in the Supreme Court to avoid having to use legally available funds that would let hungry Americans eat. Instead of working to end the shutdown, the Trump administration fired an entire office, the Community Development of Financial Institutions Fund, a critical agency that works with small lenders to offer affordable loans and assistance in rural and struggling communities. Trump's action was so outrageous that more than 220 lawmakers in Congress, including 102 Republicans, rebuked the president. I'm appalled that after witnessing Americans struggling during their 2-month paid vacation, they're gutting even more programs that Americans depend on instead of taking action to lower the cost of living. And it couldn't come at a worse time. This past October saw the highest level of job cuts since 2003. Up to 22 million Americans will see their monthly health insurance premiums double, and up to 5 million Americans may become uninsured because Republicans refuse to extend the Obamacare tax cuts and tax credits. And as more than 4 million young people experience homelessness, the Trump administration is cutting funding that could put 170,000 people back on the street. Instead of addressing these issues, House Republicans are trying to scare the American people about so-called socialism. Now, everyone here agrees that we should denounce brutal dictators like Stalin or Pol Pot, but the sponsor seems to have forgotten history's most terrible dictators like Adolf Hitler. And why aren't we denouncing modern-day dictators like Putin, who has for the last 3 years terrorized Ukraine and his own people? Why aren't we denouncing President Xi of China, who runs concentration camps for ethnic minorities? Because maybe it's because Republicans know that President Trump admires both Putin and Xi. Or if my Republican colleagues are so concerned about socialism in the U.S., why not denounce the actions we've seen in the last year that follow those dictators' playbook? President Trump has targeted the free press, targeted universities, our fair legal system, forced the Justice Department to prosecute his political opponents, sent mass federal agents and military into U.S. cities, such as mine, arrested and detained Americans, including children. He's also demanded the government be given ownership interest in American companies like Intel. If that's not socialist, I don't know what it is. And he has undermined the role of this body, blocking funding that Congress passed into law. And like other modern-day dictators, the Trump family is finding countless ways to personally benefit, using their own stablecoin and other cryptocurrencies, even as Congress considers legislation and regulators writes the rules. In fact, The Trump family is more than $1 billion richer from crypto alone since taking office. And while Americans struggle to put food on the table, Trump is building a golden ballroom in the White House, spending $40 billion to Argentina, sending it and hosting Great Gatsby-themed parties at Mar-a-Lago. Okay, all right. And so none of this, anything in this resolution, does nothing to lower costs in America. So I urge my colleagues to remove this resolution and instead simply ask a no vote and allow amendments instead of passing a closed rule. I yield back.
Thank you, Ranking Member Waters. And I'll ask the question, Mr. Hill. This resolution, the Ranking Member asked, how come it doesn't condemn Adolf Hitler? How come it doesn't condemn Putin? How come it doesn't condemn Xi? Is there a reason why you left those out? I don't see any reason why. If you're going to be condemning sort of brutal dictators and authoritarianism, why didn't you condemn them?
Well, first, I think Ms. Salazar, in her resolution, let's not forget the conditions that brought her to America, which is a Cuban exile. And so she centers her life experience about Castro's communism, which is a creature of Russia's Soviet communism. And that's at the heart of why she drafted this resolution, because she is a victim, her family's a victim herself of Castro's takeover of that country. And she talks about the death of Ukrainians at the hands of the Soviets in here. So I think she more than satisfactorily addresses some of the examples that are important to her that are the most egregious, some of the most egregious cases, but not exclusively, of the negative impacts of socialism.
So even though Putin is a dictator in Russia right now, he's left out. But what's more concerning is the idea that there is no definition at all, right, of what socialist is. And we've heard on this panel today, people condemn our mayor-elect of New York City, or the mayor-elect of New York City, who ran on an issue of affordability. The idea that we would be condemning somebody who ran on an issue of affordability, of making sure that rents are affordable, that buses work and run on time, that grocery costs are not outrageous. That is the problem. We have had everything from Medicare being a form of socialism to a democratically elected mayor, overwhelmingly democratic elected mayor, being condemned as socialist. And would those fall under that? Because there's no definition. And I think my colleague hit it right. Representative Scanlon pointed out that the frustration that Americans are feeling right now is that the rich are getting richer. And right now we know that 0.1% of households in the United States reached $23.3 trillion last year, while the bottom 50% barely hold 4.2. So what we have right now is a country where the haves keep getting more and where this Congress does not do anything to address that structural imbalance. And when they do, like with the Affordable Care Act, with Medicare, with addressing those issues, it can get condemned as socialist and equivalent to Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong and Fidel Castro and Pol Pot and these other people. When those policies are just trying to help Americans survive and pay their bills and have health care, which, as we heard on the floor last week, when Leader Jeffries cited Martin Luther King, that access to health care is the most important right ever, and we have people tonight condemning Medicare, which provides health care to our elderly and those who are disabled, as socialist in favor of condemnation. I agree with my colleagues here. This is not what we should be doing. We should be addressing that affordability crisis. Thank you very much.
Would the gentlewoman yield?
Of course.
Does the gentleman think that rent control produces more housing at lower prices for the citizens in New York? Do you
Well, you
think
know
that
what,
state control of grocery stores produces more food at lower prices?
Well, that is an issue that the great thing about democracy is that the people of New York City could decide on that, and they have decided that they want to elect somebody who is going to look at addressing these issues, because what is clear is that the system we have now is not working for Americans, that the system we have now is not making rent affordable, and it's not making home ownership available. So the system we have now, where we keep passing policies and passing tax cuts that give trillions to billionaires like you voted for last July, is not working for working Americans. With that, Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. I now recognize myself for my time of questioning. And I don't have many questions. I will just say a few things. One, there is a difference between a government that is socialistic and a government that has a welfare state mentality. That is the distinction with a lot of our European countries that have successfully had democratic programs initiated by their countries that are welfare programs, but not true socialism. Now, it's also true that socialism, since its inception, has been hard to define. And the various types of socialism and socialists disagree with one another as to who is or what is the true socialism. I think what the resolution is trying to get at, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to ask you if you agree with me, is that what we have seen is that socialism has existed now for a couple centuries. And whenever socialism becomes the predominant philosophy of a governmental state, freedom suffers and is greatly curtailed. Would you agree with that?
I do agree with that.
And that's what this resolution is trying to condemn, is it not?
It is. I mean, I think we learned that time and time again in the lessons of the 20th century. The famous Austrian economist Hayek said that time and time again, people argued, gosh, there's just not enough government in this particular sector of the economy. If we had 100% government control, we promise you we'll get a better outcome. And so, to me, programs that lead to greater state control limit freedom, they limit choice, they raise prices, they limit supply, and they're not in the best interest, which is why I think all of us as Americans should band together this week and condemn socialism.
Thank the gentleman. I yield back. That concludes panel 3, and we appreciate our witnesses for being here. Thank you. We will take a brief recess so that folks can leave and we can get set up for panel 4.